So the GoPro Hero 9 is out. I've had it for 2 months. There's a lot of things I like, a lot of things I don't like. So let's get into it. But first, this morning I was on my mountain bike and I crashed, put a huge gash on my nose. More importantly, I put a scratch in my max lens mod. Now my nose will probably heal, but this scratch is not going to. So hopefully I can get another lens mod on here quick. They're kind of hard to get. Honestly, I was debating on doing this video, but you know what? This is real life. I don't have time to wait 3 weeks till this thing heals. I figured let's just do the video and keep it authentic. So my first impression when I unboxed this camera was it's actually quite a bit bigger and heavier than the previous gen GoPros. There is one upside to this because the battery is much bigger. I'm getting around 2 hours per charge, which is pretty good. I did buy the second battery, but I've only had to bust it out a few times. The front screen on the GoPro is a nice addition. It will drain the battery a little quicker, but for mountain biking, I really don't use it that much. I kind of forgot it's even on there, because once you set your camera angle, you really don't even look at the screens when you're riding. But for vloggers and that type of shooting, that front screen is really nice. So overall, battery life is really good, but it does come at a cost. The camera is bigger and heavier. The other big selling point of the GoPro Hero 9 Black was the addition of 5K video. In 2020, pretty much any new camera you buy can shoot in 4K, but I like shooting in a higher resolution than I'm editing at. So if I'm editing in 4K, having 5K footage to work with allows you to crop in and out of the footage, and it just gives you more options in post. The 5K on this is super clean and I'm actually really impressed with it. The only downside to shooting in 5K, the frame rates are limited to 24 and 30, so there's no slow-mo and there's no super view in 5K. So it comes at a cost again, but if you need 5K, it's there. If you want to do slow-mo, the highest res you can do is 4K 60, but you can't do it in super view. But we'll get into the recommended settings later in the video. The other big question I had with the GoPro Hero 9 Black was the media mod. The media mod allows you to input external microphones, output an HDMI feed, and it also has a really nice built-in shotgun mic. When I'm not making videos for Shred Yard, I actually do video production for a living, so I saw this as a must-have accessory, mainly for the audio options. I don't know if I'll ever use the HDMI out, but if you ever needed an external monitor hooked up, you can do it. So the shotgun mic on the media mod is surprisingly good. Okay, this is with the media mod mic. Wind mode is off, the mic is coming in from the front. If you're a vlogger, this thing is right up your alley. The shotgun actually has a mic on the front and back of the unit, so you can actually select which input to use. So that's really well thought out. It also comes with the foam windscreen, which helps pretty good, but it's not gonna eliminate all wind noises. But for me, having the ability to plug in external mics is why I got the media mod. If I'm doing a trail review and I want to talk into the camera, I can plug in a Rode Lavalier Go and get crystal clear audio while I'm riding. So the Rode Lavalier Go with the Rode Mini Fur, to me, is the best option if you want to talk into the camera. The mic is right up by your face. There's some deer. This is the media mod with the Rode Lavalier Go and the Rode Mini Fur. Mic is set to standard. Or if I wanted to go wireless, the Rode Wireless Go fits perfectly on here, perfect for interviews or vlogging. It's just a really good fit on this camera. Now GoPro does sell a USB-C to microphone adapter, but it doesn't work, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. So why would GoPro even offer this if it doesn't work on the latest and greatest GoPros? If you're GoPro, create the problem, sell the solution, and that solution is the media mod, which I'm sure the profit margins are much higher on that than it is the USB mic adapter. There is supposed to be a firmware coming out that will allow the mic adapter to work, but that was supposed to be out a month ago and it still hasn't out yet. So if that does come out, it will be nice to have this instead of this big bulky media mod just to get audio input. The accessory I was most looking forward to when this camera was announced was the GoPro Hero 9 Black Max Lens Mod. I wasn't even sure what the exact specs were when it was announced, but it sounded like wider field of view and more stabilized footage. So for mountain biking, it sounded amazing. Now this will only work on the GoPro Hero 9. It doesn't fit the 7, and obviously it won't fit the 8 because that lens is fixed. The Max Lens Mod allows you to rotate the camera 360 and the footage is gonna stay level. So when you're shredding through some berms and you're really leaning over, the footage is gonna stay straight and you're gonna see your handlebars and your body angled over. So I think that's a really cool look. The only downside to the Max Lens Mod is you're limited to 2.7K. You cannot go above that, so there's no 4K or 5K with the Max Lens Mod. This might be a deal breaker, but for others, 2.7K is totally fine, especially since the trade-off is incredibly smooth footage. If the Max Lens Mod could do 4 or 5K, I wouldn't take it off ever. I could definitely see GoPro adding this to the GoPro 10, but for now, we're limited to 2.7K, 60 frames per second. The more I use the Max Lens Mod, the more I like it, but if I ever need to shoot in 4K, I do have to take it off. So there is that. Another thing to consider is this camera is already kind of heavy. When you add the max lens mod plus maybe the media mod, it's way too heavy to use on top of a normal mountain bike helmet. So that's something to think about. I usually run the chesty mount. I think that's the best view for mountain biking. So it's not too big of an issue, but you definitely feel the weight of it compared to the previous gen GoPros. So max lens mod, it basically comes down to this. If you want the super view look, and you want to keep the horizon level no matter what the camera is doing, and you don't mind it's in 2.7K, then I think this is for you. The max lens mod is not that good in low light. If you're in low light conditions, your footage isn't going to look that good. It's going to start to look muddy. And this kind of goes for all hypersmooth shooting, not just the max lens. So now the big question is, will I get another max lens mod since I scratched this one? Yeah, I'm going to. I think it's a really, really good accessory, even though you are limited to 2.7K and you got to avoid low light. I just like having this as another tool in the toolbox, so if I can find one in stock, I'm definitely gonna buy one. All right, so everybody always asks, what settings should I use when I'm shooting? So I'll show you what I use for mountain biking, but this will definitely apply to other sports as well. So right now I have it set to 4K 24, but most of these settings I'll talk about now can apply to any frame rate and resolution. So if we go to lens, I pretty much always set it to super view, 16mm. It's the widest and tallest, most immersive view that you can get out of the GoPro, and that's where this thing really shines. So when we go to hypersmooth, I usually set it to on and not boost. Boost works really well too, but it does crop into your footage a bit more, which allows it to be a little more stable. I almost think it's too stable at times. It just doesn't look too natural, but you might find that you like that look more, but I prefer to keep it on. Now we'll scroll down to Pro Tune. For bitrate, I usually set it to high. Now doing this, we'll switch the codec to HVEC, and not every computer can play this type of file, so just make sure you do that before you go record some epic ride. Now when we go to shutter, I usually leave it in auto, but there are a few things I'm going to talk about in regards to stabilization and shutter in a little bit. So let's move over to EV Comp. I usually set mine to -0.5 or -1. Doing so will help protect the highlights in your image because the GoPros tend to overexpose just a tiny bit, so this will keep those bright highlights in check. When we go to white balance, I'd recommend always setting it to a specific Kelvin value. If you leave it in auto, it's gonna always guess what the white balance should be, and that can make your footage look really inconsistent, and it's gonna be really hard to color grade if you do that. So if you're outside, 5500 Kelvin works great. So if we're inside, I would set it to 3200 as like a good starting point. Even if it's off a little bit, I'd rather grade footage that is consistently off than having footage that is drifting because the auto white balance is adjusting every few seconds. For ISO minimum, I usually set it to 100. ISO max, if I'm outside, you don't have to go too high with it, so 800 is fine. Now if you're dealing with low light, you're gonna have to bump up the ISO. I've used 1600, but above that it starts to get pretty grainy. So for sharpness, this is a setting that people tend to get wrong, and rightfully so. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but having an over-sharpened, digitalized look is not what we're going for. You can always sharpen it in post, and you have way more control if you do it that way. So set it to low. The image isn't gonna look soft or anything. There's still gonna be a lot of detail, but it won't have those sharpened edges on everything. So definitely set that to low. When it comes to color, there's a lot of debate on this. A few weeks back, I was at Red Bull Imagination, and I was actually working with 2 former GoPro employees. So of course, I hit them up with a bunch of questions about what settings to use. And they always use GoPro color unless they're in a really high contrasty area. But he said 90% of the promos and launch videos that they do, if you notice, it's always in these epic environments with perfect lighting, clean backgrounds and landscapes, because they don't want to show the limitations of the GoPro. But if you are shooting in some high contrasty areas, try flat color to get more dynamic range. Just keep in mind, you're gonna have to color grade it after that. So it's not done when it's in flat, you always gotta color grade it to get it to look normal. So if we go to raw audio, this will give you an option to save a separate audio track. I usually set this to off because I don't want to deal with another audio track. And honestly, if I want to get audio in a professional environment, I probably am not going to use the GoPro's audio at all. But there are some things we can do to get good audio from the camera. So if we go to wind, I would say don't put it on auto because when it switches from normal to wind mode, it's a really big difference in sound. It's kind of like auto white balance, always adjusting, and it just makes it really inconsistent. If you have a foam wind slayer, these do a really good job. You might be able to use wind mode off with a wind slayer, and that'll give you really good sounding audio without any wind. So when it comes to audio with the media mod, set the wind noise to off, try the foam windscreen, and then set the mic input to shotgun and use the front mic. And what's cool about the media mod, it'll actually show you the audio levels on the back screen. Now, if I have the max lens mod on, you can see that we're limited to 2.7K up to 60. And then if we go into lens, we have max super view, which is 14 millimeters, or wide, which is 16 millimeters. Obviously, we want to get as wide as we can, so we're going to leave it in max super view. Hypersmooth, we're going to set to on. So if we go to horizon lock, we're going to put that on because now our footage is going to be locked to the horizon, super stable because we have the max lens mod on. So the rest of the settings we can pretty much leave, but let's take another look at shutter. So like I said earlier, auto does a pretty good job, but as a rule of thumb, you should always double the frame rate and that will be your shutter speed. So if you're shooting at 24, 48 should be your shutter. If you're shooting at 60, 120 should be your shutter speed. The reason I bring this up is because too much motion blur is actually not good for stabilization. That extra motion blur kind of confuses the stabilization software. Hypersmooth and even stabilization in programs like After Effects work best when there's hardly any motion blur. So we can raise the shutter speed to eliminate that. Now when you shoot at higher frame rates like 60 or 120, your shutter speed should be going up as well. So you could argue that shooting at a higher frame rate will be better for hypersmooth stabilization. So what I'm saying is try these different shutter speeds and see if that affects your stabilization. Rules are meant to be broken. If it makes your footage look better, go for it. So when it comes to the GPS on this thing, it's super unreliable. There's supposed to be a firmware for this to improve it, but I don't see that happening. I actually did a video showing you how I use my Garmin GPS and sync that to my GoPro video. I'll link that in the description. So those are the settings I would recommend no matter what frame rate and resolution you're using. I'll put up these settings so you can screenshot it and then refer to it once you're out in the field shooting. Now, what resolution and frame rate do I use when I'm shooting? Well, I use all those settings we just talked about, and then I usually do 4K 24. I know a lot of people shoot in 60 and play it back in real time at 60, but I just hate that look. It looks like a soap opera. There's a reason Hollywood doesn't shoot movies at 60. It's usually 24, maybe 30. So that's my go-to. I will shoot in 60 or even 120 if I'm gonna slow it down for slow-mo. So to me, if I'm gonna play it back in real time, just shoot it at 24. Now if I put the max lens mod on, I'll be at 2.7K and I'll shoot at 24. Or if I'm gonna shoot slow-mo, like I said, I'm gonna set it to 60. So the big question is the GoPro Hero 9 Black worth getting? Yeah, I think so. I came from a 7 and the jump from quality is pretty big. If you have the 8, that's a really good question. The 5K on the 9 is really nice. But I think the deciding factor is if you want the max lens mod. So if you want horizon leveling with the super view look, I would say get the 9 with the max lens mod. So I'm curious to see what the GoPro 10 is gonna be because obviously the 10th version is gonna be special edition. I'm hoping for 4K super view with horizon level. I would definitely jump on that. So let me know what you guys think about the GoPro Hero 9 Black. Go check out the rest of the videos on my channel and be sure to subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.